You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks, and joining me today as my wonderful co-host is a man who is as twisty as Beggars Canyon. It's Mark Mulcaster. Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad I got through the intro. I'm very well. Life is busy. The Star Wars galaxy is buzzing. There's loads to talk about, as always. We haven't done an episode for a couple of weeks. It's the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace. 25 years. It's ridiculous, but it's true. But when that film came out, and it completely flipped the Star Wars galaxy on its head, because it was brand new content, all new stuff. The toys come out, the books come out, the soundtrack comes out and gives away the ending of the film. Genius. And all the other things that happened. Where were you with your fandom at that point? What sort of mind space were you in when, I guess you were, 18, 19 when that came out?
So I was 17. Well, I had just finished school when I was in college, and my kind of reputation as being like the only Star Wars kid in my year kind of continued. Yeah, I was definitely the Star Wars geek at college at Farnborough Tech. So I know I've told a story about going to UCI Bracknell and being the only one in the screening because everybody else seemed to be in another screening. However, one story I don't think I ever have shared with many people is that just after Phantom Menace, obviously all the lead up to it, you know, all those great photos, promotional photos of you in and what have you, I had hair down past my armpits. I had like long hair, long, straight, beautiful, straight hair. And I was like, do you know what? Let's get my hair cut like Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Phantom Menace, including the braid and the rat's tail. Yeah, the braid didn't last very long because, to be fair, it gets in your face. It's really annoying. You have to tuck it behind your ear. Two places that got really annoying was in the gym and when I was playing the bass, funny enough, because it would just kind of flop in front and it hit the strings and it was just a thing. So to be honest, that went. I think it lasted 2 months. But the rat's tail, that stayed until February. And literally, I was like, oh, what is this thing? It just doesn't really work without the braids. So just looking like some kind of bad 80s band. So that went, and literally, I promise you, 2 days later, got a girlfriend. And I hadn't had a girlfriend since I'd cut my hair. There's probably a life lesson in there for all the listeners. Make sure that your mullet's nice and short. But I just went into the hairdressers, got them to just cut it off. So I assume I still have it, literally this rat's tail in a paper envelope with it still tied together with a hairband. So it's like a perfectly little preserved specimen. I need to do something with it.
You need to frame it, Mark.
I was thinking about maybe see if I can put it into like a prop, maybe even see if I can get it put it into like resin and then made into like a lightsaber handle or something. You know?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing that Steve Sansweet would love in his collection, that is.
I bet you would. I'd charge him so much for it.
Wow.
Yeah. Phantom Menace. Well, I mean, that was the big film. For me, the first foray into new Star Wars like that. I mean, I was immersed in all the expanded universe and I'd read all the novels up to that point of that. So I was pretty good because for me, internet wasn't necessarily something that I really used for the fandom. I didn't really know that was much on that. I'd go to stars.com. I think that was probably the first thing I ever typed in was starwars.com, like www. And then was very much not really into like the ain't it cool news stuff and the spoilers and that. So when it did come out, I was just like, this is great. I was so surprised that it wasn't well received. I mean, it did admittedly come out thinking, can see how Jar Jar might be a little bit not everybody's cup of tea. But again, I kind of just got it for what it was, like for the kind of character and the demographic that it was aimed for. For fart jokes and stuff like that were kind of like, I kind of thought, well, that's the kind of thing that kids would love. And that's what Star Wars is. You know, it's always been like that. I don't even think The Force Awakens could beat it when it came to the hype. I really don't.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, that's the one obvious big comparison. Force Awakens coming in as it did after 10 years, I guess, 10 years since Revenge of the Sith. But we'd had the Clone Wars, you know, we'd had stuff happening and there was plenty of celebrations and God knows there was enough merch to buy. So it's not like Star Wars sort of tailed off or anything.
It hadn't gone away in the same way. You had the release of the special editions, but the big one was A New Hope. But really, I don't think, at least over in the UK, Empire or Jedi it had any much of a fanfare. I mean, like, they put Jedi out 2 weeks after Empire. I don't think there was any real promotion for it. It was just out.
I think even in the box office, I think Star Wars in the States made about 130 million, which was insane.
Yeah.
And then I think Empire did about 90 and Jedi did about 40 or 50. So you could see the tail off.
Yeah. So when it came back then, I think for a lot of people, it was like, holy hell, Star Wars is back. Whereas, like you said, by the time Revenge of the Sith, like with the internet, and I think the zeitgeist has kind of really adopted Star Wars into a much more mainstream point of reference. Obviously Kevin Smith made a big finger with it in Clerks, and that kind of continued because you had Simpsons and make references. And other than the fact that George had kind of said there's not going to be any more Star Wars, and I think we all believed him, but also I think it's secretly deep down inside, I think we all subconsciously knew it probably wasn't. Whereas it kind of felt like by 97, 98, are we getting anything else?
Special editions as a marketing exercise was genius. Made a ton of money. The Pepsi deal funded so much, didn't it? Which was an insane amount of moolah to lay down. So you kind of knew they were coming. I think for me, when Phantom turned up and we knew that was coming, was a turning point for me, because most of the 90s, even though Star Wars has never gone away, I was always collecting and reading and so on and so forth. Star Trek was massive for me in the 90s because it was like the golden age of Trek. So Trek was the biggie. I was going to Vegas to the Star Trek experience and collecting the VHSs as well and all the stuff that was coming out then. And then Star Wars comes back with a film. So it's not just a legacy thing. It's not just a re-release thing, because all through the 80s and 90s we had the widescreens and then the THXs and the remasters and then the special edition. And then the special edition comes on home video and it's all re-releases of old stuff. And then all of a sudden, bang, Phantom Menace.
There was so much to take in on so many different levels, which meant that it had rewatchability, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like a film that you kind of come away and love instantly, on the most part, is sometimes a film that actually is almost one or two notes. And so therefore you don't really appreciate it when you revisit it 4 or 5 years later. It doesn't offer you anything else. But Star Wars has always done that. I mean, I've said this about Last Jedi, and I will hold this to my dying breath, but I still think that we will look back on The Last Jedi and go, okay, yeah, actually that was better than we first realized. That's what's happened with Phantom Menace. Now, I mean, I saw it at the cinema the other day. Did you get a chance to see it in the end?
Yes, I did, and the Acolyte stuff at the end, which was great.
Yeah, that film still holds up so well. Okay, I'm sure if you were to do a side-by-side comparison of the textures that they could do 25 years ago and now would be generations apart. But yet somehow the way that the actual CG just kind of blends seamlessly into the film just works a lot better, and certainly worked a lot better than Attack of the Clones, which I know that's to do with the cameras and stuff, but it's really odd because you'd kind of immediately think Phantom Menace being the oldest of the prequels, you'd think that would be the one would be a little bit ropey, but it's not, which is really interesting. And I think that's just testament to everybody, how much they really put into it and just literally left nothing out. Just left it all on the screen, which is, I think it shows now.
It does show. So happy 25th birthday, Phantom Menace. We appreciate you. Let's hope other people come to that film and enjoy it as much as we did seeing it after all those years again. Obviously, some people are going to be discovering it for the very first time.
Hi, it's John Jackson Miller, and you're listening to Fantatracks.
So SFX Magazine, they've got a Doctor Who cover with their latest issue, but there is loads of stuff related to Star Wars, specifically The Acolyte. And in there, producers Rain Roberts and Simon Emanuel discuss the show. They also discuss Leslie Headland's pitch for the show, which apparently was powerful enough to incite tears in some people in the room. So Rain says, Leslie said it was Frozen meets Kill Bill in Star Wars and immediately communicated a kind of emotional entanglement and also high-octane action. It was like, I think I understand what this is, and it started a conversation that led to me elevating her pitch, ultimately up to Kathy. Leslie is an amazing storyteller, and when she finally pitched Kathy, everyone was crying. It was that kind of meeting. And Simon Emanuel goes further and says, the thing I picked up on and got very excited about was Kill Bill. One of the things we talked about really early on was action, and I really believe that in these kinds of shows, action has to be a character. It can't just be, give me a punch, give me a lightsaber fight. So I introduced Leslie to a guy called Chris Clark Cowan, who was an action designer and part of the team who worked on the Darth Vader sequences in Rogue One. Leslie and Chris completely fell in love, and action became such a component of this story. For me, it's the best action the franchise has seen, and there's so much of it. So a little bit to unpack there. it's a pitch that really, really worked to the Lucasfilm top brass. And also, they've made action very much a key focus of what they're doing. Of the things that we've just heard about there, what sort of leaps out to you initially?
Do you know what? And maybe this is a good thing, because they've done this for quite a few. I mean, they're doing this with Skeleton Crew. I think it's the first time I've heard anybody allude to Kill Bill, which I think is quite good. They've been saying this since they announced Skeleton Crew Arts and Amblin style, and that immediately kind of sets tone and puts in like a certain kind of like expectation from the viewer as to what we're going to get. And I think with the Acolyte, we've all been, ooh, what is the Acolyte? What's it going to be about? And we've kind of been told it's kind of a bit of a mystery about. And, you know, Kill Bill was this kind of homage to Japanese samurai films and revenge films in particular, which then now opens up a whole host of questions as to what are we actually going to get when this series drops in like a couple of weeks' time.
I think it's interesting, like you say, they're using comparison points to get across the vibe of what the show's about. And also, we've seen it as people who are involved in Phantom Tracks, the blistering negativity this thing is getting before anybody's seen anything other than a few clips in trailers or teasers. It's going to be a job to convert those people into giving it a chance. And I dare say that some of these people are so entrenched in wanting to hate on it that even if they love it, they wouldn't say. But I guess the bottom line really is if they really want to have any weight of their words, they've got to watch it, which means people are watching it, which means Lucasfilm were winning. So it's all good in that sense. So they can't criticize it if they've never seen it. It's a dead conversation. And also, I think putting action to the fore almost as a character, that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because they know that final scene from Rogue One, the Vader scene, which was, from what I understand, fairly late in the day, was so iconic. It's such a key Vader moment. It was instantly, but now more than ever, to put somebody in that position as the guy that's going to lead that and make moments like that throughout the Acolyte, that's quite a cool thing to do.
It's quite in keeping, really, with the Phantom Menace. Whilst the action was always meant to be, you know, you never seen Jedi lightsabers like this in terms of the fighting. Nick Gillard and Matt, they had to come up with a narrative and they had to come up with ensuring that the characters were relayed through also the way they fought, not just what they wore and what they said. So it's perfect timing, really. And yeah, it's very easy. I see it when I'm with Saber Guild. Every single class is different and they build a sequence of 10 moves, right? And it takes an hour to show them and teach them that. And one of the things that the instructors always say is you can now appreciate how much time and effort and thought goes into actually making a lightsaber combat. It's taking us an hour to do 10 moves. How long would it take you to do a 5-minute duel or something like that? Or something, you know, on a scale of Duel of the Fates or Battle of the Heroes, you know, weeks and weeks and months and months and months. And whilst obviously all the swingy flourishes and stuff like that like Obi and what have you do is cool and awesome, that ultimately you still got to tell a story. It's really good that they focused on that and made a point of kind of saying, right, okay, this isn't just going to be flashy like lightsaber stuff. We're going to have to use this. And I think it's the right way of doing it. On-screen violence, you can tell when it's just random on-screen violence because it's not very gratifying. You need something more. And obviously in this day and age, audiences are far more savvy. They'll see through it. They'll see through if it's just literally just an action scene for the sake of getting people to buy more lightsabers. I think it's definitely the way forward. I think it's a really positive thing.
One of the other things that they both said in that same interview was talking about the tone of the show and how it's very much a Star Wars project. And Rain Roberts said the detective element is very high in the mix. I would say the story engine of the show is tracking down the assailants. It's not procedural, but they are on the hunt, looking at clues, talking to people and trying to figure out where things might go next. Kind of like Attack of the Clones, I guess, with Kenobi on the hunt. And then Simon Emmanuel continues. It's not a sleuthing show, but it's a show with mysteries and reveals. Hopefully that comes back to Leslie and her puzzle box storytelling. And I think it's going to be really rewarding to the audience to see how things unfold. It's a different genre take on Star Wars, but it's still utterly Star Wars in its essence. So making very clear to let you know that you are definitely within the realms of Star Wars, and maybe this is a different approach at telling a Star Wars story. Andor is different to Ahsoka, is different to Mandalorian, and so on and so forth. So that's understood, and that's not a bad thing because all of those things worked. The detective element, that totally grabs me. I love the thought of a sleuthing mystery throughout the Star Wars galaxy. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really had something really like that really since kind of a whole mystery of Cypher Dis and the Clone Army with Attack of the Clones. And good thing for them to try again, because I think that was probably one of the story elements of the prequel trilogy that I think didn't necessarily land with many fans as such. You know, some people really liked it, other people like it's too slow and boring. And an investigative story is definitely one that will need to have some time for it to build and for the tension to be created. So I think I'm really excited to see how it's going to kind of all come together and over like how many episodes. Because the thing is, we can't all have shows like The Mandalorian, because it kind of comes back to what I said. It's like too much ice cream. It's some, you know, you need some meat and potatoes. And yes, we've got the meat and potatoes with Andor, but again, that's a show that is resonating with fairly dyed-in-the-wool Star Wars fans, but not everybody's getting it because it's not the Star Wars that they want. Whereas this, I think, might be a slightly different step in the direction. So therefore, it might capture general fandom because it might be slightly easier to get on board with. But that's a hope anyway.
Yeah, Jedi, lightsabers, being on Coruscant, all things that we're kind of familiar with, even though it's a century before. Well, it's out on the 4th and the 5th of June. 2 episodes come to Disney+. We shall be doing our reaction chats back on board with those episodes as well. So very much looking forward to doing that. So stay tuned. There's loads and loads and loads of Acolyte stuff coming to Phantom Tracks.
Hi, this is Julie Dolan, the voice of Princess Leia, and you're listening to Phantom Tracks. It's your only hope.
Great news if you're a fan of Mandalorian and Grogu, because it's looking quite likely that Sigourney Weaver, who we already know, of course, from Aliens and Avatar, she is looking very likely to be a part of the cast of The Mandalorian and Grogu. No other news on it other than that she is in line to be in the show. I'm excited about that because, for goodness sake, it's Sigourney Weaver. Mark, what do you make of this potentially fantastic news?
I think it's cool. Yeah, actually, when somebody mentioned it to me before the news kind of really got publicized on ground level, I was like, that would actually be quite an inspired casting. What character she could play, I'm not quite sure. I was kind of thinking maybe like she could play like Pelimotto's older sister or maybe mum or something. I don't know why.
That.
I think it's something to do with the hair. You know, I think you kind of need some of these big names. We've always done it with Star Wars. You have a big name to anchor in a bit of gravitas. Yeah. And I think it'll be cool to have Sigourney in the galaxy. So yeah, I'm well on board for this one.
We don't know the status really of Pedro Pascal's involvement because he's very much involved in making Fantastic Four, which is presumably the priority at the moment, and season 2 of The Last of Us and all the other stuff that he's involved with. We know now that he is the voiceover guy for the character of the Mandalorian. So how involved he's going to be, it's unknown. Throwing in an A-lister like Sigourney Weaver is a very smart move. I love the Pelimotto idea, by the way. I think there's a good chance, or potential at least, that she could be like a Dryden Voss type character. I could kind of see her in that sort of role because she's got all the class in the world and there's not a lot that Sigourney Weaver can't do. So I just wonder who the adversary is going to be in this film. Whatever she plays and whatever role she has, I'm all in for it. It can be very interesting to see how they use her.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark phantomtracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So the weekend of the 11th and 12th of May, Phantom Tracks went down to the South Coast to Portsmouth Comic Con. We had a fantastic time. We spoke to a few people, including artist Paul Fry. Readers of the ongoing Darth Vader comic from Marvel will know Paul is working on some of the later issues of that run. We sat down with Paul, had a little chat about his career and what's coming up in the future. So here's myself and Paul Fry discussing all things Darth Vader and much more.
So we're here at Portsmouth Comic Con. It is Sunday afternoon. It's roasting hot, and I'm sat here with Paul Fry, which seems kind of an apt name for such a hot day.
Exactly, I've heard worse.
How's the weekend been for you?
Oh, it's been an amazing weekend. This is my 3rd time at Portsmouth, and every time I come here, it's boiling hot. So,
guarantee good weather.
It's good weather. Problem is, there's no aircon in here. So we have to open the windows, and then that means all the prints go flying everywhere.
Oh,
but no, it's fun. It's a fun convention, and I love it.
I was going to say, I mean, this is terrible because we've covered news for years and years and years, and we had no idea it was such a big show. There was so much going on. It was such a family event. It's caught me massively by surprise.
Yeah, well, I was just, to be fair, I was just looking around. A couple of years ago, I knew I had a book. I was working on a book for Marvel at the time, Spider-Man, not Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I was just looking at conventions. I'd love to go, and I looked at this, and you had artists such as Adam Hughes and Rick Leonardi.
Yeah.
who was supposed to appear. And I was like, oh my God. And as a fan myself, I'm a big fan of comics, and they're two of my favourite artists. Yeah. So like, I'd love to go to that. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I could go as a guest as well, because I've got some books coming up. I'm working on Spider-Man 2099. Rick Leonardi created Spider-Man.
They did that back in the day, didn't
yeah, so I thought that'd be perfect. So I said, I posed it as I'm a local artist. Is there a chance that I could get a table? And I went, yeah, please come along. Came to it. Unfortunately, both of those two artists didn't end up turning up, and it was all to do because of coming out of COVID. Yeah. And I think Adam did a workshop online, which was a shame. But my book came out the week of the convention, which I didn't know at the time. Nice. When I applied, so it was just a fantastic time. Realised that there were all these other creatives here, other professionals. And it was a lot bigger than I expected, and the venue itself was amazing. There's so much going on. Yeah. And it reminds me of the old days of just going, what's happening over here? Let's go have a look. Yeah. And you run into this. There's a panel over here. Let's go over here. And you're just having such a wonderful time, and you can see that by the people coming in.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you say, it's a family-orientated show, loads of kids. Yeah. But again, there's not that many shows when you'll see a current Marvel artist, with all these other guys who are working on High Republic, and there's Russell Walks just literally walking away. Sorry, with all the bad puns. And so it's such a it's not, but it feels like a well-kept secret, because we've got Michael Siglain here. Yep. Which is like, that blew my mind. I mean, you usually only see Mike at like New York Comic Con, San Diego, the big
events. Yeah, I know. We've got Troy Alders here. He's been here. He was here a couple of years ago as well. Yeah. So they must have loved it, and it's word of mouth, I guess, that's going on. But on Facebook, I've noticed a bigger push this year on Facebook. Yes. I've even noticed from where I'm from. We're a small little town, and we were sitting in the train station a day, and there's a poster for it for Portsmouth Comic Con, and I thought, I'm going to that as well. Yeah.
Which is always nice.
So I took a photograph.
Go on socials. That's good for podcasting.
Exactly.
So for yourself, I mean, you're on the current Greg Pak run of Darth Vader.
Yes.
How has that been? Because that is such a hot comic. The storylines have been phenomenal. All four ongoing. After is now finished, Bounty Hunters is now finished, but they've all got their own unique flavour and style and tone. Greg's work is very specific. He's delved into the past of Vader and brought a lot of, really, the prequel trilogy stuff to the fore, as well as folding in the Exegol stuff from 9. It's a real mixing pot. For you coming in as an artist, that must be an absolute treat.
It is. It keeps you on your toes, because the two issues I've done was helping out. They were a little bit behind due to whatever reason, and they just asked me to help on a few pages on one issue and a few more pages on another issue. Yeah. So trying to figure out, they introduced new characters as well, which I had to get my head round, and trying to figure out where everything was at a specific time. And because it was such a short deadline, that was a bit of a... It was fun and games, let's put it that way. But once I've got it down, the first issue, when they said, "Can you help with the second issue?" I was like, "Yeah, no problem."
Are short deadlines always a bad thing, or can you overthink things sometimes? I don't mean you specifically. I mean artists in general.
I guess it depends on the project and how much you're into it. But when it comes to Star Wars, anytime there's something, do you want to do this for Star Wars? Of course I do. And do you want to do Darth Vader? What do you think? Yeah. So
I've been drawing him since I was 6. Of course I do.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that you said the first one was only 3 pages for issue 44. Yeah. And they said, okay, we'll give it to you Tuesday. Could you have it done by the end of the week? And they but because it's like, I'm doing Vader. My God, I'm doing Vader. Yeah. You're just like straight on it, and bang, it's done. It's done. And you're But if you can you do 20 pages by next Tuesday? You're like, it's Vader. You do like 3 pages. You're really excited. Then you go, oh my God, I've got so much to do. How am I going to do this? So you haven't got that time to think. But because it was 3 pages, I was able just to go bang, bang, bang on that one. And then it was 5 pages for the next issue. But it wasn't a shorter deadline, which was lucky. So,
so I'm presuming you were a fan before.
Oh yeah. Since I'm old enough now to. I did see it in the cinema when I was in the UK, so that would have been about 78 over here.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing it in the cinema, but I remember, it's a story I say to everyone, I remember getting the bubblegum cards.
Yes.
And being able to place that from the film.
Nice.
So I have seen the film, but I can't remember seeing the film, but because I was just that too young. But that's the original. But the Empire and Return saw the cinema, and I do remember seeing them. I do remember loving it. I even remember my mum telling me when, they're making a follow-up to Star Wars. I was like, are you kidding me? And then they said, and Luke's going to fight Vader. And I was just like, spinning around on the floor. You can't get that sort of excitement anymore.
No. So doing that, very special. Very special.
100%, yeah.
What's coming up next? Be it Star Wars or anything else that you're doing?
Right, got a couple of things. There is something else that's in the work for Star Wars. Can't really say too much about that. But I don't think it'll be long before people will find out. Cool. I'm doing a book for Image, a series for Image, with writer Joe Casey.
Right.
It's called Blood Squad 7, and it's basically a team similar to Youngblood.
Yeah.
And all the teams that came out in the 90s.
Yeah.
And what they're doing now.
Oh, nice.
And it's a bit more hardcore. And that comes out in I think the 22nd of this month, so a couple of weeks. Nice. Issue 1 anyway comes out.
Looking forward to that.
So that's gonna be. It's got a bit of a buzz around it, so it's gonna be interesting.
I think that era. I mean, for my sins, I listened to Robservations. I hear Liefeld talking about all the old stories and all the old stuff, and he's the best hype man for himself in the galaxy, of course. But it's very interesting I was a big collector back then, so it's interesting to get back into that sort of era and remember just how hot those comics were.
Oh yeah, it's great. We try and take what was already there, and then just this is what's going to happen now. And the fact that we've got Joe Casey writing it, and he's Mr. Image through and through. I know he's done runs on X-Men and brilliant runs on X-Men, but I remember getting collections of Wildcats, more for the art, and it was Sean Phillips at the time. I'm a huge fan of Sean Phillips, and I'm just reading this Wildcats collection. I go, my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is Jim Lee's Wildcat. What? What's going on? I love Jim Lee, by the way.
Yes.
So I'm reading it, I'm going, this is amazing. And I got the next collection and going, that's amazing. And found out that was Joe Casey. So when he emailed me out the blue to do this Blood Squad, I was like, nah, not that Joe Casey, nah. Oh, wow. And he goes, do you fancy doing this? I went, yep, yes please. I did collect everything at the time, when Image first came out. So
happy days.
Yeah.
And any more events lined up for you in the short term, or maybe even long term?
No. I'm looking at applying to actually go abroad. I went to Montreal a couple of years ago.
Nice.
But that's my only overseas event, and I didn't have very much out at that point. Now with the Image book coming out, I'll see what I could do.
Artist Alley at New York Comic Con?
New York is a dream, so I've applied, so let's fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So, thanks for your time, really enjoyed
no problem at all, thank you.
So the weekend of May the 4th and 5th saw Podathon return that had many podcasts involved, including the always awesome Full of Sith with Brian and Holly. And they had on as guests Matt Martin, who, congratulations, Matt, just recently got married, and Pablo Hidalgo. And in that conversation, Pablo dropped an absolute nugget of a bit of information regarding George Lucas's appreciation for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And here's the quote. This is Pablo speaking. So early on, there was a conversation had with George over what his thoughts were and whether or not, honestly, he brought the whole concept, and he was 100% supportive. And I've heard tell it's one of his favourite things that's come out of Star Wars. Now, there's been a bit of pushback online regarding that comment from Pablo because, hey, people are obviously going to know more about Star Wars than Pablo freaking Hidalgo, who worked with George personally on set for years and years and years. But anyway, the thought that George gave the Fabuloso seal of approval to the Obi-Wan Kenobi series makes me very happy. But Mark, what do you think about that?
I would think that's probably fair enough to say. It's not a big stretch to think that maybe Ewan playing a younger Obi-Wan, who's very much in George's wheelhouse and that, with a young Leia, but I think actually is the kind of character that I think he would put in if he was to ever direct another Star Wars film or series. Kind of makes sense. It's kind of continuation, but also it's filling in the gaps a little bit, isn't it, really, between his two trilogies. So do we know, has it been publicized before, who George's favorite character is?
I don't think it has, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if Kenobi was the character. I mean, obviously Luke was kind of sort of loosely based on George back in the day as a younger man. But Obi-Wan, I mean, you think when he was on Jon Stewart's show. He had Jon Stewart at one of the celebrations, didn't he?
And Stu John.
Stu John, yeah. So I know he did it the same sort of thing with Conan O'Brien, with Conan Antonio Motti. So he kind of plays around with it himself. If George was still around, we would have definitely had plenty more sort of Robot Chicken, Family Guy, all the other stuff that we never got, because he was quite happy to be quite kind of loose and fun about it. But in relation to Kenobi, I thought it was great news. I mean, Pablo wouldn't say that. That's a hell of a statement to put out there if it's not true. I kind of got the impression that George sort of liked it. That's a definitive, hey, George liked the idea, thought the concept was great. But I think also the way that they did the story, the original Star Wars, especially the original trilogy, what he said is definitive to a point, but they never go 3.5 years ago, somebody said this, or 10 years ago, somebody said that. It's been a long time. Well, 5 years is a long time. 10 years is a long time. They're not defining anything. They're not boxing anything off. And of course, who would have known that technology in Star Wars would last 40 plus years and even have the opportunity to fill in that story gap? So I think George, as a pragmatic guy, would look at that and go, you know, if I was still around, if I'd have got the Grady Ranch going back in 2007 and I had a made Underworld and it had worked out, would have ILM being the innovators they are, they'd have got it cheaper and quicker and better and whatever. And so this could have been George doing it 10 years ago rather than selling it and us seeing Disney do it now. But I think in his head he's thinking, you know, maybe I would have gone back to that 19-year stretch, and Ewan is just the right age now, and, you know, maybe I would have done that. This is me hypothesizing. I think George probably looks at that and thinks, that's maybe somewhere I could have gone with that. And so the execution and the explanation, the fact that where is it ever stated that Obi-Wan never left Tatooine? Where? Find it for me. I don't remember ever seeing that. Certainly not in anything that you would consider official canon in 2022, I think, when Kenobi came out. I just think that George would look at that and think, that does stack up. And of course, we all thought it was going to be Luke, and it was Leia.
Yeah.
It's that lovely twist.
And now when you think back at it, it's so funny because I think we were all so myopic about that. I don't even think Leia came into it. I mean, I think if we were to go back and listen to our conversations prior to seeing Obi-Wan, we never really thought about it. I think, if anything, we had just assumed that he would maybe communicate with Bale over radio, and that was about it. The pluses and minuses of that series, I think, has always had a lot of heart. There's some really tender moments there between Obi and Leia, and I think that's the kind of thing that would resonate with George as well. You know, I'm speaking as if I know him. It would have been a bigger talking point, actually, if Pablo turned around and said, yeah, I think Book of Boba Fett was George's favourite series. Then I think we'd be like, really? Okay. I don't know if this kind of rings true a little bit, to be fair, but I don't see how or why there'd be any reason to want to argue that claim, really.
On one hand, it's great that we get so much content. It's fantastic. And so much of it is of a pretty high standard. Not everything's going to be Empire Strikes Back or The Last Jedi. So it just depends on where you are. So nothing's ever going to be, nothing's ever going to consistently be at that level. So I think you get something like Book of Boba Fett, for example, you just mentioned it, that's quite pulpy and quite... Disposal was not fair because I think there's some fantastic stuff in it, but it's not cornerstone Star Wars. Whereas I think Kenobi, if that was the only Star Wars thing that came out that year, and there's parts of it that work great, and there's other parts that, 6 episodes? On one hand, part of me thinks they stretched out a movie plot to 6 episodes. On the other hand, I think they reached for so much that they could have got more out of it. It probably could have stood another couple of episodes, because I don't think they really served the Inquisitors well enough. I don't think Reva's story was delved into to sufficient degree. There's more to tell, and they've never really gone back to it. I expected a book or a comic, and they've not gone there. So there's more to go to if they want to on that. But Ewan was so good, and Vivian was so good, and there's enough just there that I can see that's why George would have watched that. I mean, Pablo doesn't say watch it. I think he's talking about the brief, the concept, the initial idea. But let's assume George did watch it. Let's assume he watches everything. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see just where he is with that.
To be fair, if I'm honest, I've always had that vision of George, now in retirement, waking up on a Wednesday morning and running downstairs in his pajamas with a big bowl of 3POs and watching Bad Batch or Ahsoka or something like that. And just sitting there and being able to do the thing that he never was able to do before, which is enjoy Star Wars more as a fan and not as a creator. That's the kind of image that I'm going to hold in my head as I go to bed tonight. So now I've got the hankering for 40-year-old cereal. I think it's time to go and get something to eat. So with that in mind, I think it's time to end this episode and say thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Making Tracks. No listeners' question, but I'm pretty sure I have an inkling we might get one next week. But if you'd like to send in a question, Mark, can you tell everybody how they can do it?
I certainly can, and this is how you can do it. I'm just going to say I'm going to go and eat my bag of scratchings now. Visit phanthrax.com or be sure to comment, like and share on our social media feeds at Phanthrax. Send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@phanthrax.com. Subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Temple for composing the Phanthrax intro, Anna O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings, 9 o'clock UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. And check out our Phanthrax Radio Friday night rotation every Friday at 7 o'clock UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks. And every Tuesday at 7 o'clock UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks. And remember, phanthrax.com, our social media feeds, Phanthrax TV and Phanthrax Radio are absolutely free. So no Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Kickstarter or Indiegogo required to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news. And that's all from me for this episode.
Brilliant, mate. Me and you have another live episode in store very, very soon, because I think we're both heading down to MCM London this coming weekend.
Yeah.
Which means that if you're at the London XL and you see me and him walking around talking to one another, then you're more than welcome to come and say hi. And if you get scared, just stand around and wait until we finish. But if not, I hope everybody has a fantastic Star Wars week, whatever that means to you. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Phantom Tracks Radio, it's Desert Planet Discs.